December in Lagos City was like a market on fire. Music poured from every corner, lights flashed like lightning, and people danced as if tomorrow would never come. This was Detty December, the season when wallets opened wide and hearts beat faster. Kingsley moved through the crowd carefully, balancing a tray of food on his head. Sweat ran down his face like river water. He was a delivery boy, working hard while others played. The smell of roasted meat and expensive perfume filled the air. Suddenly, a drunk man stumbled into him, and the tray tilted dangerously. Kingsley caught it just in time, his heart pounding like a drum. That's when he heard the laughter. Charles stood nearby, dressed in clothes that cost more than Kingsley earned in 3 months. His friends surrounded him like flies around honey. "Look at him!" Charles shouted, pointing at Kingsley. "Too poor to enjoy December." The crowd turned to stare. Kingsley's face burned with shame. Then, through the sea of mocking faces, a gentle voice spoke. "Leave him alone." Maria stepped forward from the crowd, her eyes soft but firm. She was beautiful, the kind of girl everyone noticed but few could approach. Charles had been trying to win her attention for weeks, buying her gifts she never accepted. Now she was looking at Kingsley with concern, asking if he was hurt. Kingsley shook his head quickly, too embarrassed to speak. He picked up his tray and hurried away, but he could feel Maria's eyes following him like warm sunlight. Charles watched this exchange, and something dark twisted in his chest. His friends noticed the change in his expression. "Oh, Charles, you don't see one of them said, nudging him. "The girl never looked you like that before." Charles forced a smile, but his hands had formed fists. How dare she? How dare a poor delivery boy receive what he, Charles, could not buy with all his money? That night, as the city continued its wild celebration, Charles sat in his expensive car, thinking. The next morning, Charles found Kingsley at the small restaurant where he worked. "My friend." Charles called out, his voice suddenly friendly like old honey. Kingsley looked up, surprised and suspicious. Why would Charles speak to him after yesterday's humiliation? "I came to apologize," Charles said, placing his hand on Kingsley's shoulder. "I was drunk yesterday. You know how December can be. Too much enjoyment can make a man foolish." Kingsley nodded slowly, still unsure. Charles continued, his smile wide and false. "In fact, let me make it up to you. There's a big festival this Saturday at the Golden Arena. Top musicians, free food, everything. Come as my guest." Kingsley wanted to refuse, but the offer was tempting. He had never been to such places. Later that day, Maria saw Kingsley and asked about his work. When he mentioned Charles's invitation, she smiled. "Maybe you should go and enjoy yourself more. You work too hard." Her encouragement made the decision easy. Saturday night arrived like a queen in golden robes. The Golden Arena blazed with lights that turned night into day. Music shook the ground beneath Kingsley's feet as he stood at the entrance, amazed. He had never seen such beauty, such excess. Charles appeared beside him, dressed in white from head to toe. "Welcome to the real December," Charles shouted over the music, pulling Kingsley inside. Tables overflowed with food Kingsley had only delivered, never tasted. Girls danced in clothes that shimmered like fish scales. Charles bought drinks and pushed them into Kingsley's hands. "Drink. Enjoy. Tonight, you're not a delivery boy, you're my friend." Kingsley drank, grateful but confused by Charles's sudden kindness. The alcohol made his head feel light, and the music seemed to enter his bones. Charles stayed close, always refilling Kingsley's cup, always smiling. Hours passed in a blur of sound and light. Kingsley laughed more than he had in months. Then he needed to use the toilet. When Kingsley returned, something had changed in the air. People were staring at him differently, whispering behind their hands like women at a funeral. Charles stood near the security guards, his face painted with false concern. "Officers, please check his bag," someone said. Kingsley froze. "What? Why?" Two security men approached him roughly, their faces hard as stone. They opened his small bag and pulled out 3 expensive phones, the latest models that cost more than Kingsley's yearly salary. "I didn't. I don't know how." Kingsley stammered, his voice shaking like leaves in a storm. The crowd gathered quickly, pressing close like walls closing in. Charles pushed forward, raising his voice. "Kingsley, how could you? I brought you here as my friend." His words were loud enough for everyone to hear, and they had the opposite effect he intended, or perhaps exactly the effect he planned. People began shouting, "Thief! Arrest him. This is why poor people shouldn't come here." Maria had just arrived at the festival when she heard the commotion. She pushed through the crowd and saw Kingsley surrounded by angry faces, saw the phones in the security guard's hands, saw Charles pretending to be shocked. Her heart told her something was wrong. "Wait," she called out, but her voice was swallowed by the noise. The security guards grabbed Kingsley's arms. Panic filled his chest like flood water. He had done nothing wrong, but who would believe him? Not these people who saw only his cheap clothes and calloused hands. Not in this season when everyone was looking for enemies to prove their superiority. Kingsley twisted free and ran. Behind him, voices shouted for him to stop, but his legs carried him like wine through the back corridors of the arena. Maria tried to follow, calling his name, but the crowd blocked her path. Kingsley burst out into the night air, gasping and terrified. The bus to Umunze village left at dawn, carrying Kingsley away from the city that had chewed him up and spat him out. He sat by the window, watching Lagos disappear behind him like a bad dream. His phone was off, he couldn't bear to see what people were saying about him online. The village appeared after 3 hours of dusty roads, a place where time moved slower and December was just another month, not a season of madness. Agatha was sweeping her compound when Kingsley arrived. She was his father's childhood friend, a woman whose face was mapped with wisdom lines. "Kingsley," she said, dropping her broom. "What brings you here?" He tried to speak but tears came instead. Agatha pulled him into her arms like he was still a small boy. Inside her small house, over gari and soup, Kingsley told her everything. Agatha listened without interrupting, her eyes seeing beyond his words. "You will stay here until your spirit is come again," Agatha said firmly. The village wrapped around Kingsley like a soft cloth. Here, nobody cared about Detty December or expensive phones. Here, work was honest and simple. Sunday, a young farmer with a ready smile, befriended Kingsley on the 3rd day. "You look like city trouble followed you here," Sunday said, handing Kingsley a hoe. "Farm work will help you forget." And it did, somewhat. Kingsley worked in Sunday's cassava farm, feeling his muscles remember old rhythms from childhood visits. Sweat cleaned more than just his skin, it washed away some of the shame. The village people accepted him without questions. But on the 7th day, trouble found him again. A young boy ran to the farm, his eyes wide with excitement. "Uncle Kingsley. Uncle Sunday. People are talking about you on Facebook." The boy showed them his cracked phone screen. Kingsley's face stared back at him with the word thief written in red letters. The post had been shared thousands of times. Someone had recorded the festival incident, and Charles featured prominently in the video, looking like a concerned friend betrayed. Comments poured down like rain. "This is why you can't trust these hungry boys during December. Poverty is not an excuse for stealing. He should be in jail." Kingsley felt his newfound peace crumbling. Sunday put a strong hand on his shoulder. "Don't mind them. Village people know you're not a thief." But village people were not the whole world. That night, Kingsley sat outside Agatha's house, staring at the stars that seemed so much brighter here than in the city. "I should go back and explain," he said to Agatha. The old woman shook her head slowly. Truth always returns home, she said mysteriously. But not always gently. Wait small. Days passed. Then, late one evening, Kingsley's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Where are you? I believe you. Maria. Maria had been digging like a woman searching for lost gold. Something about that night at the festival didn't sit right in her spirit. Charles's shock had seemed too performed, too loud. And why had he invited Kingsley in the first place after publicly humiliating him? She started asking quiet questions. The bartender remembered Charles talking to Kingsley's bag while Kingsley was in the toilet. A cleaner mentioned seeing Charles near the security office before the discovery. But fear kept them from speaking loudly. Charles's family had money and influence. Maria needed proof. She befriended one of the security guards, a young man who seemed uncomfortable every time Charles's name was mentioned. After 3 meetings and many gentle questions, he finally cracked. That night, Charles came to us before the boy returned. He gave us something to put in the boy's bag. Maria's hands trembled as she recorded his confession on her phone. Now she needed to find Kingsley. Charles stood in his bathroom mirror, practicing his innocent face. Everything had gone perfectly. Kingsley was ruined, and Maria would soon forget about the poor fool. But then his friend called with disturbing news. Guy, I hear say Maria they ask questions about that festival night. She even they talk to the security people. Charles's reflection frowned back at him. This was not part of the plan. He made calls immediately, using his father's name like a weapon. The security guard who had spoken to Maria received a midnight visit from 2 men who didn't need to say much. Their presence alone was a threat. If you talk again, you go regret they said simply. But Charles's instinct told him this wasn't enough. Maria was stubborn. He had learned that when she refused all his advances. If she was digging, she might eventually find something. He thought about Kingsley hiding in some village like a rat. Perhaps it was time to finish what he started. Charles's car pulled into Umunze village on a Tuesday afternoon, disturbing the chickens and drawing curious eyes. He had found Kingsley's location through a mutual friend who didn't know the full story. I came to check on my friend, Charles announced loudly when he found Agatha's house. I was so worried after he ran away. Kingsley came out slowly, his eyes hard with suspicion. What do you want, Charles? To help you. Charles replied, his voice dripping with false concern. People are saying terrible things. Maybe if we go back together and you apologize, explain that you were drunk and made a mistake. I made no mistake, Kingsley said quietly, but Charles talked over him. Sunday and Agatha watched from nearby, feeling something poisonous in the air around the city boy. That night, Charles stayed at a small guest house in the village, but he didn't sleep. At midnight, he crept back to Agatha's compound, quiet as a snake. Charles knew which room was Kingsley's. He had noticed during his afternoon visit. The window was old and opened easily with a small push. Inside, Kingsley slept deeply, exhausted from farm work. Charles moved like a shadow, pulling one of the stolen phones from his pocket. He had kept it for exactly this purpose, insurance against any future problems. He slid it under Kingsley's bed, behind a box of old clothes where someone searching would definitely find it. Perfect. Tomorrow, he would make an anonymous call to the local police station, reporting that stolen property had been traced to this village. They would come, they would search, they would find the phone, and Kingsley's small remaining dignity would be crushed completely. Charles smiled in the darkness and slipped back out through the window. But he didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows of the compound, watching him with sharp eyes. Sunday had not been able to sleep, disturbed by bad dreams. Sunday knocked on Agatha's door before dawn. Mama, I see something way no good, he said urgently. He described how he had seen Charles sneaking from Kingsley's window in the night. Agatha's face became serious as stone. "Wake Kingsley. We must check his room." They found the phone exactly where Charles had hidden it, still wrapped in the plastic it came in, proving it had never been used. "This man is wicked," Agatha whispered. "He's trying to trap our son again." They held a quick meeting in the small kitchen. Sunday wanted to confront Charles immediately, but Agatha was wiser. "If we accuse him, he would deny it. He has money, we have only truth. We must be smart." She suggested they leave the phone where it was but prepared to prove how it got there. Sunday agreed to watch the house carefully. Later that morning, Agatha's phone rang. An unfamiliar female voice spoke. "My name is Maria. I'm looking for Kingsley. I have evidence that can help him." Maria arrived in Umunze as the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red like a warning. She had traveled quietly, telling no one except her sister where she was going. Kingsley's face when he saw her was a mixture of shame and hope. They sat outside while Maria explained everything she had discovered. "Charles planned it all. I have a recording of the security guard confessing." She played the audio, and Kingsley felt his chest tighten with anger and relief mixed together like oil and water. "We need to go back to the city," Maria said. "We need to expose him publicly." But before they could plan further, Agatha touched Maria's shoulder, her eyes sharp. "Quiet. Someone is outside the gate." A shadow moved in the darkness, then disappeared quickly. Someone had been listening. They didn't know whether it was Charles himself or someone he had sent, but now their enemy knew they had evidence. Dawn broke with the sound of vehicles. 2 police cars pulled into the village, their sirens waking everyone like a cockcrow. Charles stood beside them, wearing a concerned expression like a mask. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," he said loudly. "I traced one of the stolen phones to this village using its tracking system." The police knocked hard on Agatha's door. "We have a report of stolen property on this premises." Villagers gathered quickly, confusion and concern on their faces. Kingsley came out, his heart sinking. Not again. Not when he was so close to proving his innocence. One officer pushed past him into the small room and emerged minutes later holding the phone triumphantly. "Found it under his bed, just as reported." Charles gasped dramatically. "Kingsley, I gave you a chance to confess. I came here as your friend, and you still have stolen property." The village murmured. Even those who had believed in Kingsley began to doubt. But Sunday stepped forward, his voice cutting through the confusion like a sharp knife. "Wait. This is a setup." He explained what he had seen the night before, how Charles had sneaked into Kingsley's room. Charles laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "This villager is lying to protect his friend. Officers, do your job." The senior police officer looked uncertain, caught between a poor villager's accusation and a rich man's confidence. That's when Agatha spoke, her old voice carrying surprising authority. "If you believe this boy is guilty, then search everyone. Search Charles too." "That's ridiculous." Charles protested. "I'm the one who reported." "Then you have nothing to fear," Agatha interrupted. The police agreed, perhaps because her grey hair commanded respect. As they patted Charles down, his face changed from confident to nervous. And then it happened. A phone slipped from his jacket pocket, falling onto the ground with a soft thud that sounded loud in the sudden silence. Maria stepped forward quickly, picking up the phone before Charles could react. "This is the exact model that was stolen at the festival," she said, turning it on. The phone's wallpaper showed the festival venue. Charles's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. That's mine. I bought it after what?" Maria interrupted. "After you framed Kingsley." She pulled out her own phone, playing the recording of the security guard's confession for everyone to hear. The crowd listened in shocked silence as the truth spilled out like water from a broken pot. Charles's face lost all its color. These people are conspiring against me. My father will hear about this. But his protest sounded hollow now. Even the police officers were looking at him with different eyes. The senior officer made a decision. We are taking both of you back to the city. There will be a proper investigation. And Mr. Charles, you will be answering many questions. The police van rumbled back toward Lagos City, carrying Charles and Kingsley in opposite corners. Charles stared at his expensive shoes, while Kingsley looked out at the landscape passing by, his heart beating with cautious hope. Maria and Sunday followed in a commercial bus, holding the evidence like precious eggs. The city appeared on the horizon, still decorated with Christmas lights though the month was almost over. In the police van, Charles's phone kept ringing. His friends calling, his father demanding to know what was happening. He didn't answer. Kingsley remained silent, remembering his father's words from long ago, the truth may travel slowly, but it never loses its way home. The senior police officer received a call that made him sit up straighter. Sir. Yes, sir. We are bringing them now. You found what? He turned to look at both young men with new interest. There has been a development, he announced. Someone at the Golden Arena found old CCTV footage. The police brought them not to the station but to the Golden Arena itself. It was New Year's Eve, and another massive festival was happening. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more terrifying. Thousands of people filled the venue, dancing and celebrating, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Charles tried to resist entering. Why here? This is irregular. But the officers ignored his protest. They were led to a security office where the head of security waited, a tall man with a stern face. We found something interesting, he said, pointing to a computer screen. Our main camera was damaged that night, but we forgot about the backup camera in the corridor. He pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed Charles following Kingsley to the toilet, then quickly returning to where Kingsley's bag hung on a chair. Charles's hands moved swiftly, pulling phones from his pocket and pushing them deep into the bag. The security head made a decision that would change everything. Bring them to the main stage. Charles panicked. No. You can't. This is private. But the officers were already moving. The festival stage was massive, with lights and a crowd of thousands. The DJ stopped the music as police appeared, creating confusion. The head of security took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we need your attention for an important announcement. The crowd quieted, curious and irritated in equal measure. The big screen behind the stage flickered to life, showing the CCTV footage. At first, people didn't understand what they were seeing. Then recognition rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. That's Charles. And that's the delivery boy from last month. The video played again, this time in slow motion. Charles slipping phones into Kingsley's bag while Kingsley was absent. The crowd's mood changed instantly from confusion to anger. Charles saw the thousands of eyes turning toward him with disgust and fury. He had spent his whole December being admired, envied, celebrated. Now, in seconds, he had become the villain of the season. He tried to run, pushing past the police officer nearest to him. The crowd booed and shouted. He jumped off the stage and ran into the festival grounds, but his expensive shoes weren't made for running. Behind the stage, thick cables powered the lights and sound system. Charles didn't see them in his panic. His foot caught in a loop of black cable, and he fell hard, his body hitting the ground with a sound that made people gasp. Security guards caught up to him quickly, pulling him to his feet. His white clothes were dirty, his face scratched and bleeding slightly. All his arrogance had leaked out like air from a burst balloon. Please, he begged as they dragged him back. Please, I'll pay. My father will compensate everyone. Back on stage, the microphone was handed to Kingsley. He stood there, looking at the sea of faces that had once mocked him. Maria stood beside him, her hand finding his. Sunday waved from the crowd, grinning with pride. The senior police officer spoke first. After reviewing all evidence, including CCTV footage and witness testimony, Kingsley has been completely cleared of all charges. Charles will face prosecution for theft, defamation, and conspiracy. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. People who had called Kingsley a thief online were now celebrating his innocence with the same enthusiasm. Kingsley took the microphone, his hands shaking. "I don't have big words," he began quietly. "I just want to say, December is a beautiful time. But it shows who people really are. Some people use it to show off and destroy others. Some people use it to help and support." His voice grew stronger. "Be careful who you follow. Be careful who you trust. In this dirty December, shine your eyes." The festival host, moved by the story, invited Kingsley to stay for the New Year countdown. On the big screen, they showed the time, 11:57 p.m. 3 minutes until a new year began. Charles sat in a police car outside, watching through the window as the celebration continued without him. His phone had been seized, his father had stopped answering his lawyer's calls, and his friends had all suddenly become busy. Everything he had worked to build, his reputation, his image, his power over others, had collapsed in one night. Inside, Kingsley stood with Maria and Sunday as the crowd began counting down. 10. 9. 8. Maria squeezed his hand. "You were strong," she said. 7. 6. 5. Sunday shouted the numbers with everyone else, his joy infectious. 4. 3. 2. Kingsley looked up at the sky, thinking of his father, thinking of Agatha's wisdom, thinking of how truth had finally caught up with lies. 1. Happy New Year. Fireworks exploded across the sky, painting the night with colors that had no names. The crowd erupted in celebration, strangers hugging strangers, phones raised to capture the moment. Kingsley felt tears on his face, but they were different from the tears he had cried in the village. These were tears of relief, of justice, of new beginnings. As the fireworks continued their dance above, police led Charles away. He would face court, face shame, face consequences he never imagined when he first decided to destroy another man for pride and jealousy. The city that had rejected Kingsley now celebrated him. But he had learned that the city's love was as changeable as its weather. What mattered was the truth he carried inside and the people who stood by him when darkness came. As the celebration continued into the new year, one message spread through social media, shared thousands of times: "During dirty December, shine your eyes. Fun reveals character, greed reveals punishment. Move wisely, or the season will expose what you hide." Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. If so, please like the video, comment on what you have learned from the video, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel.